all the conditions that we have discussed, all the incidents which happened locally, regionally, and globally are actually showing development. However, we agree to what Albert Einstein said, that we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And therefore, we have to add something about development. So what is it that we're going to add? We're going to add the description sustainable development. Otherwise, what will happen to us and to our generation would be the principle called tragedy of the commons. This describes the relationship where individuals or organizations consume shared resources and then return their waste back into the shared resource. And if this continues to happen, the tragedy arises when each individual or organization fails to recognize that everyone else is acting in the same way. And in this case, we are already doomed. So what are we going to do? Since we all agree that engineers like us are in the front line of causing this global destruction, what we need to do is we have to recheck and reassess our roles as engineers. Now, for engineers, you have a direct effect on the design and the development of the products. You also have a direct effect on process and systems, and as well as the natural systems. And you do this through material selection, project sizing, and end-of-life handling of products. Now, as chemical engineers, this particular portion, the third one, or all of these steps would be shown in your design class. So you remember in your design class, what do? You select the material that you use. Then, with respect to the selection of the material, it's also important for you to what? To identify the source of this raw material. Now, identifying the source of the raw material would involve the selection of the project site. So, in identifying the project site, you have to identify also the capability of this resource to provide the particular material that you need. Now, what do you think would happen if we don't consider sustainable development? Normally, we consume a lot of the resources, and therefore, as sustainable engineers, you have to consider an alternative resource. And then after that, after those considerations, you also have to consider the end-of-life handling of products. So for example, if you would like to know how this particular product that I'm holding would be affecting the environment, you don't just consider how this will be disposed, but you also have to consider what materials are you going to make use of, how much of these materials are you going to make use of. After considering the global interest in sustainability and then the consequences of technology through engineers like us bringing environmental degradation, let us now define what is sustainable development. And then later, we'll try to consider the history and how do we integrate engineering principles that you have learned in your course with that of the sustainability concept. So we define sustainable development as meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. If you consider the present generation needs, you only consider development. But the definition states that you also do not compromise the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. And in that case, your development should have the adjective sustainable. For the history of sustainable development, it all started with a protocol or an agreement among countries. So in 1992, they held an Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The purpose is to set forth goals and recommendations related to environmental, economic, and social issues. Later, we will discuss that these are the three important dimensions of sustainable development. Then after 10 years, the same countries and some members were added, they have met again in the World Summit on Sustainable Development, this time in Johannesburg, South Africa. In this summit, they have checked whether they have reached the goals that they have set 10 years ago. And then after another 10 years, in 2012, they have held the World Summit on Sustainable Development. This time they went back to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Now, in the most recent summit that they have adopted Millennium Development Goals. Now, you can check the website, www.un.org, Millennium Goals, and to emphasize that there's really a need and global interest in sustainability, the 7th Millennium Development Goal says to ensure environmental sustainability. The sustainable development is actually based from the report made by Brundtland. This means, according to the report, living off the Earth's income rather than eroding its capital, and then keeping the consumption of renewable resources to the limit of the replenishment. It means handing down to successive generations not only man-made wealth, but also natural wealth. Now, I would like to emphasize here successive generations. That would be related to how we define sustainable development.